Good to see all of your feedback rolling in. We've got a fun evening ahead. I'm going to invite Richard on stage now from Autistic All Along. We're going to have a chat for about 20 minutes or so, including some Q&A with you guys. And then we've got a bunch of breakouts lined up as well. Here he comes. Hello, Richard.
Hey, how you going?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Good. Can you hear me okay? Everything's
all clear, looking good, can hear you. Let us know in the chat. But yeah, all loud and clear. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time. We did a great Substack interview with you recently, but it's great to have you here on video too. For those that aren't familiar, can you tell us a bit more about Autistic All Along?
Yeah, I discovered last year that I'm autistic. I'm self-diagnosed. My wife actually suggested that I might look at it. She's very good at, you know, diagnosing conditions and things. She's always been like a go-to unofficial doctor, but my behavior had become erratic to the point where she thought maybe I should test for autism, and I was not really receptive at the time. I thought, you know, I like a lot of people, my idea of autism was, you know, Rain Man or Benedict Cumberbatch in Imitation Game. So I was like, that's outrageous, it's ridiculous, how could I be autistic? But as I tend to do, I went away and thought about it for myself and sort of slowly came around to thinking, okay, let's try it, because at least we can get that off the table. So I did a bunch of online tests, but they were all ones that were actually, you know, they weren't like Facebook tests or stuff like that. They were all like ones that are geared, psychological tests that are used in official testing. And I did the DSM-5 for autistic spectrum disorder, which is what is used in official tests. And I answered the questions, compiled my answers, and compared to my current behavior, my past behavior, and read a lot of accounts from people like Fern Brady, you know, their journey with autism. And by the end of this, I was 100% convinced that I am autistic. And not just that, I was also 100% convinced that my father was autistic. So I have two autistic nephews. So there was a family history. They have had official diagnoses. And so here we are. So I decided I wanted to start writing about it. I've always been a writer. I love writing. Figured I'd start writing about my journey and my discoveries, and, you know, looking back on my past and all those moments where you go, oh, right, so that's why I acted like that. You know, that's why I was a dick in that particular situation. You know, it's just kind of grown from there.
That's great. There's some really interesting articles on there. I've been down quite a rabbit hole over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, thanks.
I guess your diagnosis is like relatively late in your 50s,
yes.
and I think that can maybe be like a life-changing thing for some when they get a late diagnosis, and some things kind of retrospectively make sense. What's it's obviously quite recent as well. You said it was only a year or so ago. What's
just over a year?
Yeah. What's kind of changed since the diagnosis for you?
Well, I guess the main thing that has changed is that I now have access to tools that actually help me manage the problems that I was having. So, I mean, the biggest problem I was having was meltdowns. I was turning into a monster. Really, you know, it's Jekyll and Hyde. I was having these moments where I just lost complete control of my cognitive reasoning and my, you know, and I was unrecognizable. And of course, this is not conducive to a happy marriage. I mean, my poor wife was suffering through these things, and without knowing what it is, it's very hard to solve the problem. But now, once I'd accepted that it's, you know, this is an autistic meltdown, I now am more and more able to see it coming, to put myself in situations where I can calm myself. I can feel, you know, the overwhelm. Then I put some noise cancelling headphones on, or I'll sit and watch a movie, which is like my special interest. Find myself a quiet corner, and then I can kind of manage it. And also, conversely, there's meltdowns. There's also shutdowns. So there were times when I was just withdrawing for days on end, and I couldn't function. I couldn't regulate my emotional state. The word shutdown is accurate because I would just disappear. And so because I now know what it is, I'm more able to avoid these things happening and then mitigate them or ease them when they do happen. So that's been the biggest difference. And then other than that, it's been just an explanation. I mean, if you imagine, looking back over 40 years, 50 years of life and having all these incidents where you knew you were acting odd, but you didn't know why. And you've also almost reached the point where you don't even really think about it anymore. But suddenly you have this missing piece that you can apply to all these situations. And it really is like a light bulb moment where you think, oh my God, that's why I did that. Social situations in my life where I just got up and walked out for no reason because I couldn't do it anymore. And things like that, things that everyday things you look back on and think, now I can explain it. And that's a gift.
Yeah.
It really is.
On that point, one of the posts you wrote actually that really stood out to me was about neurotypical burnout. And actually you had a really lovely quote in there, or a powerful quote, I should say, which is neurotypical people become overwhelmed by life. Autistic people become overwhelmed by living.
Yes.
Do you want to expand a little bit more on that kind of
Yeah.
burnout? You said about like you just leave the room or
yeah. I mean, that's the distinction. It's a fine distinction. And I was trying to explain, the difference between regular burnout, neurotypical burnout, and autistic burnout. And so neurotypical burnout, which is definitely a thing, is when someone, they're overwhelmed by stressors in their life. So, stressful times at work or stresses in their relationships. And it becomes too much and they lose their temper, they become exhausted. That's what everyone can understand. But the distinction I was trying to draw in that post was that a neurodivergent person can become exhausted and overwhelmed by just being. So any sensory input can overwhelm us. So we could be having a great time. We could be at a party or a ball game, or we could be in a group of friends and family, and just the influx of information is just suddenly too much. So we reach this point where we lose the ability we lose our executive function, which is, emotional regulation, working memory. Suddenly we can't remember anything going on or what we were supposed to be doing. We have trouble organizing ourselves. And so, and I had read accounts of people who've been in burnout, autistic burnout, for years. They say that for years they've never been able to come out of it. So it's something that you skirt the edges of on a daily basis. And again, it's, I try to mitigate it when I know that's what's happening. I try and find myself a quiet space. Again, special interests can help us, focusing on things that just bring us calm and peace. And so that's what that's what the burnout is. And it's just a strange thing for someone to understand that we can be burned out by as much by good input as by bad input. So it doesn't have to be stressful situations. It just has to be a lot of information and a lot of sensory input.
On the subject of stressful situations and different kind of inputs, I guess some environments, it sounds like you're quite comfortable when you have some level of control and you can kind of mitigate against certain things. One of the interesting things is like when we think about the world of work and how many autistic people probably are in environments that don't match them.
Yeah.
And I guess on one hand, autism is almost this like incredible superpower and I think that there was an interesting point that Ellen pulled out on our Substack, was that actually autistic professionals can be up to 140% more productive than the average employee when they're properly matched to a job that fits their skills.
Absolutely.
As a writer, do you think you were quite well suited? Like, had you already built an environment pre-diagnosis, or what are your kind of thoughts on the world of work and autistic people?
Yeah, I mean, I've been self-employed for, I guess, nearly over 10 years, maybe more than that, 15 years as a web designer. And I mean, I've done a lot of different jobs during my life, and a lot of my life, especially in my, after I left university in my 20s and 30s, I was just drifting from job to job because I had no idea what I wanted to do or what I was even meant to do. So I did office work, I did shop work, I've had jobs that I loved, and then believe it or not, I was a window dresser once. I was a window dresser in a department store, and I absolutely loved doing it. I did do the window displays, and I think a lot of that was because I was working under my own steam, and it was creative in a certain way. But I lost that job because of an injury. I couldn't do it anymore. I managed a video shop, and I hated that. And I think that's because I was constantly dealing with people. Any job I've had where I was constantly dealing with people, I didn't last long because I just exhausted me. So yeah, working for myself is ideal because I set my environment and I set my timing, and I can stop at any moment if I need to, and take a break and do what I need to do. But and writing's always just been something I love. It comes naturally to me. I grew up in a literary household, so I've been around writers and writing my whole life.
Love that. No, it shows that the work's great. And on that, perhaps for some of us that like work in bigger organizations or kind of different environments, and I guess there are some neurodivergent people out there that maybe haven't put themselves in environments where they can kind of control their schedule.
Yeah.
How do you think we can kind of be more inclusive towards neurodivergent people or autistic people, perhaps around us? And then so many who are probably undiagnosed as well, right?
Oh, hundreds. It's a lot of it is just listen to the individual. I think there's a lot of skepticism when someone says, I can't, if your employee says to you, I can't come in today, I will not be able to function. I would be much more productive if I stayed at home. I think employers now need to be more open to the possibility that their employer is neurodivergent for a start, their employee. And don't be so suspicious. Don't be so, I think there was during COVID a time when remote working became like the thing, and we all imagined it was going to be much more of a trend, but then there was a backlash against it. And so I think one thing that would help neurodivergent people is remote working, is don't be so committed to controlling the environment. If your employee wants to sit there with a big chunky pair of headphones on and they say that that's what they need to get their job done, then you let them do it. And I don't care if you have a rule that says you can't bring your music in or stuff like that. You've got to be more flexible. So I think employers just need to be more flexible, more understanding, and more open to the idea of neurodivergence. And then they may actually see that, like you say, their employee is suddenly much more productive because their needs are being met. We imagine in every situation and in every societal construct that there's one single set of rules will apply to everyone, and if they can't adjust to that, that is their problem. And so I think that we need to change that. That's a big change, but.
Totally. I've got a couple more questions, but would love to open it up to the wider community here. So if you do have a question for Richard, feel free to pop it in the chat. We'll take a heart as an upvote, or I can call out some, but yeah, feel free to pop any in. Another kind of interesting avenue is kind of where autism and politics have kind of come into the common discourse.
Subject.
Yeah, and you've written some really interesting stuff around it. What's your kind of take on how it's been used at scale at the moment in kind of the public discourse, and how does that make you feel?
Well, as you know, or maybe you don't, I live in the United States. So my wife's American. I'm a citizen here now. So I've been here for 8 years. And so here, I'm not so sure how it is in the UK. I've kind of lost touch a little bit. Here, as you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is now the health secretary. So he is now, for some reason, declared war on autism. He wants to find the reason for it. He's committed to testing and finding what causes it. He has made speeches where he says that autism destroys lives, destroys families. Autistic people will, they'll never pay taxes, they'll never play baseball, they'll never write poetry. He is presenting an image of autism as a disease that needs a cure, as a problem that needs solving, when it is not. It is a neurotype. It is a different way of processing information. And while there are always going to be people on the spectrum that have difficult lives, and their families by connection have difficult lives, it is counterproductive to treat it as a disease. And I think that, at least in his case, he's doing this because he has an agenda, and his agenda has always been anti-vaccine. He believes that vaccinations cause autism, even though there are hundreds of tests that say otherwise. So he's announced that he's going to find the cause of autism, and he originally said we're going to do it by September. And so if you say you're going to find an answer like that by September, that can only mean that you already know what your answer is, because science doesn't work like that. You can't announce science will have an answer to something by a set date. So yeah, I think he's taking us, the autistic community, and the understanding that we have built over the last 10 years back, and it's harmful.
Yeah, we won't go too deep on US politics here this evening, but I feel
Probably
you.
for the best, yeah.
Yeah, Elaine, who's actually a brilliant author herself, in the chat has said, Richard, are you able to say more about how autism presents differently in men and women?
I mean, I can't speak with absolute authority, and in my experience, I don't know if it's the case that autism presents differently in men and women. I think that it's more a case that autism is interpreted differently in men and women, and I think that, there's a long history of women being underdiagnosed or undiagnosed at all, with autism, simply because of the standards that have been set for male and female people in, masking, which autistic people do to try and fit in. We try and maintain eye contact, engage in small talk. We try and fit into a neurotypical environment by masking what we really want to say or do and what we feel. I think from what I've gathered, it gets very misunderstood in women, because women are traditionally brought up to be much more demure, much more withhold your true real emotions. Aggressiveness in women is frowned on in a way it's not with men. So I think that I mean, Fern Brady's book actually states a lot of what the struggles are for a female autistic that a male autistic doesn't. And I'm not going to presume to tell you the struggles of an autistic woman, because that's not what I am, and I can tell you what I've read. But I think the biggest problem isn't how it presents, but how it is diagnosed and how it's received.
Totally. Another good question in from Alexandra. She says, do you ever have to confront people telling you that you can't be autistic because you're not autistic enough? And how do you explain?
To be honest with you, I haven't encountered that personally. I can't tell you people haven't been thinking it, but no one's actually said it to me. And I guess if I was to be 100% honest, I said it to myself initially when it was suggested that I might be. I actually would have, my reaction was, well, I'm not autistic because I'm not, I don't look like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man. So yeah, I think obviously it exists. People have a preconception about autism as they do about anything else. I haven't encountered it yet, but a lot of that's to do with the fact that I don't see a lot of people. I work at home. I don't have a large social life. I don't want one. But yeah, I'm definitely aware that that problem exists, because again, people have this idea, this notion of autism, and they forget what a wide spectrum it is.
Yeah, 100%. I think even with my own brother, if he was on this call or you met him out and about, like you would never assume anything.
Yeah.
If you lived with him for an extended period of time, you would be like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
and I say that with all the love in the world, but it's like two different people entirely.
Yes, yeah. And going back to the male-female thing, I mean, I can be quite blunt, and I can say things in a conversation that are a little left field or a little, controversial. I don't know if that's the right word. I can get away with it because I'm a man, and people would not assume, oh, he must be autistic because he said something stupid or rude or whatever. A woman does it, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. So it's not people's go-to assumption when they hear things like that. When they see someone not making eye contact, they think they're just being rude. It's just not what people assume first.
No, it's an interesting perspective on the male-female divide there. Lovely question from Kaylee as we kind of begin to wrap this section. What's the best thing about being autistic?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't know. The best thing for me, I think, if I'm honest, is that it gave me an identity that I'd never had, and it gave me a clarity that I'd never had. And I think, for me personally, the best thing about being autistic was that it has set me on a path of self-discovery and clarity that for 54 years beforehand I never had. And community, there's a sense of community. I mean, I've on Substack, and I found such a community of like-minded people. So I think personally, that's the best thing. I'm not a math whiz. Um, I don't have any special superpowers as a result of autism that, I can't be, I'm not a code breaker. I'm not an ace detective. I'm not, I don't see patterns in everything. So yeah, that would be my preference.
Well, if writing is your channel, long may it continue.
Thank
Because
you.
there's some really nice stuff on there. My final question, was kind of like, what's the plan? You built this really interesting and quite like distinct niche Substack community and style of writing. Like, we're a nonfiction book club. We got to ask the question: is there a book on the horizon, or what's the plan with it? Or are you kind of happy
There
just?
is, yes, there is a book. Obviously, the last 2 weeks have been weird because all of a sudden you wanted to interview me, and then you asked me to be in this forum as a special guest. So yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but it did make me start wondering if I should start a book, which I have actually done. Actually, the weird coincidence is, before you invited me on this thing, I had gone on Substack and put a post out to everyone, give me some ideas for anecdotal books on autism. I wanted someone to suggest a book that treated the subject with humor and had someone telling their story, because that's the kind of book I would want to write. And then someone suggested strong female character, so I actually started reading it before you even asked me to come on and talk about it, which was, it's meant to be. But yeah, there is a book in the works.
I thought, yeah, it's funny how the universe, these
Yeah.
things all come together. But I agree. I think having read a lot of books over the last 10 years, I think any nonfiction that flows like fiction, some of the best reads that have stood out for us over the years have been kind of
Yeah.
scandals and funny books, and they just work so well. And it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful way to package what is quite a deep, serious message in a way
Yes.
that's like totally memorable. And this is the kind of book I think that I saw someone else put this on one of our WhatsApp channels. Of, it's like, when someone who doesn't read a lot of nonfiction wants a recommendation, this is exactly the kind of book you recommend, because they're going to get into it
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
I
just going to
completely
flow.
agree. I completely agree. I'm a big fan of treating things with levity and humor. I mean, it's one of my quirks. When I'm stressed, or when things are rough, I tend to make bad jokes, inappropriate sometimes. But so I wanted to, because I find a lot of books about autism are very dry, and they're very there's a almost a flat line to them, which and I think writing with humor it's what I do in my Substack, and kind of laughing at it a little. That's my bag. So her book was just perfect for me, because that's exactly the tone that I tend to try and set.
Nice. Well, we look forward to the book when it comes into the
Thank you.
world. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you so much for jumping on.